So I gotta say, some of this AI art going around is seriously blowing my mind. It's like yesterday we were impressed by those AI portraits, and now it's creating crazy realistic videos from just one image. We've got a fascinating deep dive ahead of us today, exploring how AI went from like language whiz to, well, I guess you could say picking up a paintbrush.
Yeah, it's a wild ride full of twists and turns, kind of like an art history lesson, right?
Totally. And speaking of wild rides, your research talks about these things called transformers. Honestly, at first I thought, giant robots crunching data to make art? What's going on here?
Not quite robots, thankfully. Think of transformers more like master code pickers of the AI world. They were actually designed to figure out language, and not just like word by word, but how it all fits together, to make those really complex ideas work. It's almost like teaching a computer to not just read, but to really understand a novel.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. But how do you go from that understanding language to creating actual images? That seems like a huge leap.
You're right, it is. To get how we got there, we got to rewind a bit to the days before Transformers were the cool kids on the block. That's where GANs come in, or generative adversarial networks.
GNs, right, yeah. Your notes mention something about them being like rival artists having a creative battle. What's that all about?
That's a great way to put it. Imagine two networks, each with their own artistic goals.
Right.
You've got the generator, its whole thing is making realistic images. And then you have the discriminator, basically the ultimate art critic, trying to spot the fakes. It's this constant back and forth, this creative tension that forces both of them to get better.
So the generator is trying to like trick the discriminator, and the discriminator is like, nope, not falling for it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The generator gets better at making realistic stuff, and the discriminator gets better at spotting the tiniest flaws. This whole, I guess you could say, creative tug of war, that's what led to those early AI art breakthroughs.
That's so cool. So if Janes were like running the AI art show, how did Transformers even get involved? Were they like the new kids on the block who just showed up with a whole different skill set?
Yeah, you could definitely say that. So while GANs were busy battling it out, Transformers were becoming masters at understanding relationships in sequential data. And researchers started to think, hey, what if those same principles we use to understand how words connect in a sentence, what if they could work for pixels in an image too?
So instead of just looking at an image like piece by piece, Transformers could get the whole picture at once, like understanding composition and style like a real art expert.
Exactly. That's exactly it. This new way of doing things, directly using the transformer architecture on images, that's how we got vision transformers, or VITs. Before VITs, we were all about convolutional neural networks, or CNNs. They were like, those super meticulous art students studying each brushstroke in isolation.
Ah, okay, I see. So CNNs were all about the nitty-gritty, the fine details, while VITs were seeing the bigger picture, right?
You got it, 100%. And with that ability to grasp the whole image, VITs opened up tons of possibilities for creating AI images.
Okay, now I'm really interested. But before we get into specific models and all that, there's something I'm curious about. If Transformers were so good at this whole image thing, why didn't they take over sooner? Like, what were the challenges holding them back?
Great question. It really boils down to one big thing: computing power. Think about it. We're talking about insanely complex models here, dealing with mountains of data. Imagine trying to paint this giant, detailed mural on one of those old computers that could barely open a Word document.
Ouch. Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem. So even though Transformers had the potential, the technology just wasn't ready for them yet.
Exactly. Handling all that visual information, the colors, the pixels, it just took way more processing power than what was available at the time. But of course, like with everything in tech, things change fast. And that leads us to some game-changing models that really shook things up in the AI art world.
Okay, so we've gone from AI artists duking it out to these vision transformer things, analyzing whole images at once. But how do we go from still pictures to like full-on moving masterpieces? That's where video transformer networks come in, right? VTNs. I gotta admit, even for me, the idea of AI making videos is like next level.
Oh, it definitely is next level for sure. But here's the cool part. Those same ideas we've been talking about, they still totally apply, even with something as crazy as video.
So, like, Transformers changed how we look at images by understanding how all the pixels work together. So VTNs do that, but with frames of a video instead of just pixels.
Exactly. You got it. It's like we're teaching AI to watch a movie and actually get the story,
Mm.
not just see a bunch of random pictures flashing by.
Okay, yeah. And the key to this whole thing is self-attention, right? That's how transformers understand sentences. So is that how VPNs make sense of a whole video at once?
That's exactly it. Self-attention helps the VTM look at the whole video sequence so it understands how each frame connects to the ones before it and after it. It's all about relationships, just like with words in a sentence.
Okay, so it's like the AI is actually watching the movie and understanding the plot, the characters, the whole thing.
You got it. That's a great way to think about it. VTNs are built to understand all those details, how scenes change, how things and people move. It's like they're learning the language of film.
This is kind of blowing my mind here. You're telling me these models can create a whole video from just one image that's like straight out of sci-fi.
It might sound like sci-fi, but it's real. It's happening now. They learn from tons of data, right?
Yeah.
So they see all these patterns, movements, possibilities, and then they can use that knowledge to make a whole moving scene from just a starting point.
Wait, seriously, just one picture and the AI can make a whole video? That changes everything. Filmmaking, animation, even stuff like, I don't know, security footage. The possibilities are kind of endless.
You're getting it. And research in this area is moving so fast, it's kind of hard to keep up with. There's one model that I thought was super interesting. It's called Vivid, short for Video Vision Transformer. It was developed by Google Research.
All right, break this Vivid thing down for me. What makes it so special? There's a lot going on in the world of video generation.
So the cool thing about Vivid is that it makes the whole process much more efficient. Remember how we talked about CNNs being used for images? Well, Vivid doesn't need CNNs for that initial processing step. It goes straight to using the transformer architecture on the raw video data.
So it's like skipping a step in the art process, going straight to the masterpiece without doing the rough sketches first.
That's a great way to put it. Vivid breaks down the video into these tiny bits of information and then uses its transformer abilities to analyze how those bits relate to each other within each frame and across all the frames.
So it's like understanding those tiny details and how they change over time, but on this massive scale. And it gets the whole time aspect of video too. Wow. But all this talk about AI analyzing and creating video in real time makes me think of like the Matrix, you know?
I know, right? It's not just a random comparison either. With GPT-4 and now Google's Gemini doing real-time video analysis and generation, it's getting hard to tell what's real and what's made by AI.
It's pretty amazing, but also kind of creepy. Like we're entering this world where just seeing something isn't enough to know if it's real anymore, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Before we go all philosophical, let's talk about some of the challenges in all this because it's not all easy, right? So we've talked about how fast AI image and video generation is moving. It's almost hard to keep up. And yeah, a little creepy, like we said. But you mentioned some hurdles earlier. What are the biggest challenges for this technology right now? Like what's stopping it from being even more, I don't know, mind-blowing than it already is?
You know, it really comes down to one word. Power? Remember how we talked about computational power being a big deal earlier on? Well, it's still a huge hurdle, especially with video generation. These models need a ton of data. They're really complex. So to train them, you need massive data sets, powerful hardware, and it takes a lot of energy, which is a whole other issue.
So it's like trying to power, I don't know, a whole city on a handful of those tiny watch batteries.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm not even exaggerating. It's a real concern. But the good news is that researchers are trying to make them more efficient. They're looking at new ways to train them, different architectures, so we don't need as much brute force computing power.
That's good to hear. It seems like every day there's some crazy new AI breakthrough, which I guess brings us back to what you were saying about telling the difference between real and AI created stuff. What does all this mean for us, you know, for regular people just trying to keep up?
It's a good question, and it's tricky. On one hand, we've got this incredible power to create, to visualize, to make things that were impossible a few years ago. But that power comes with responsibility. You know, we need to be careful, think critically.
So it's not just about understanding the tech itself, it's about questioning what we see, right? Like realizing that things might not be what they seem.
Yeah, exactly. If AI can make these super realistic videos from just a picture, or even just words, how do we know what's real anymore? That's something we all need to be asking ourselves as this tech gets more advanced. It's not even just about, like, deepfakes or manipulated videos. It's about what it means for how we see the world, how we decide what to believe.
It's a lot, that's for sure. But like they say, knowledge is power, right? Even just understanding the basics of how this stuff works is so important.
I totally agree. It helps us ask the right questions, look deeper, and that's what I love about these deep dives. They give you the knowledge to form your own opinions.
I think that's a good place to leave it for today. If just seeing something isn't enough to know if it's real, what can we do? How do we know what's authentic in a world where AI is everywhere? That's something to think about. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.